the U.S. Army Garrison Command. This is regarding the supplemental programmatic environmental assessment for Army 2020 forest structure realignment. That's a lot of words, but there's a lot to be learned about it tonight. The long and short of it is this, Wahiawa community. We are facing an inevitable reduction in the number of troop strengths here at Schofield Barracks. And whether it's 5,000 or 8,000 or 16,000, it will have an impact upon our community in many ways. Not only the business community, but in our schools, our civic institutions, our churches, our friends and family. And the relationship that we have had with the U.S. Army, our Garrison Command, going back over 100 years in the Wahiawa community. So it's time for us to step up, speak up, and saddle up and support our Army. So any further, I'm going to bring up two of our friends. Charlie Hota is with the Military Affairs Council for the Chamber of Commerce of Hawaii. And he and I said at a meeting yesterday, and we said that we need to get our community involved in this. So we've been fortunate to add him on to our meeting. We give him about 30 minutes, half an hour. So please listen in and ask questions, and let's get empowered to help our Army. Charlie?
Okay, aloha everybody. My name is Charlie Hota. I'm really with the Chamber of Commerce of Hawaii, and I serve as a liaison for the state in all matters relating to the military. And one of the hot issues right now involves Schofield Barracks and Fort Shafter in the Moanalua area. And this evening we're lucky to have Lieutenant Colonel Derek Chen from Schofield Barracks, and in the back there is Dennis Drake in the black aloha shirt. But you know, they're both from Schofield, and they're out here this evening to discuss with you. Now believe me, this is the worst case scenario that could happen, but it involves the community surrounding Schofield Barracks and Fort Shafter. So Derek will come forward now and discuss with you what the Army is studying right now and what could happen. And if it does happen, it could have severe impact on the state of Hawaii.
Thank you, Charlie. Ladies and gentlemen, aloha. Lieutenant Colonel Derek Chang. I'm with the Public Affairs Office of the 25th Infantry Division, and work very closely with our Garrison Public Affairs Office, U.S. Army, and have some oversight for U.S. Army Hawaii. For a little bit about myself, I've been at Schofield here for the last 2 years, but prior to that, I was also stationed here from 2006 to 2010. I was with the Brigade Public Affairs Office and also worked with the division. And I've spent time, different times as a Brigade Public Affairs Officer. I've been to the Wahiawa neighborhood boards, talked about the community and what the Army was doing to the community back then. We also deployed, while I was back in the division, we deployed twice with the division and with the brigade during that time frame. And what we understood at that time frame was about every other year you'd see a unit leaving Schofield and then coming back, or the divisional headquarters would come out and come back. And that has been going on almost for the last 13 years. In 2013 was the first time the division in total, the 25th Infantry Division in total, was back at Schofield, where you had all our brigades and the headquarters all at Schofield at one time. And you probably felt it in traffic, you probably felt it as, it felt a little crowded, but at the same time it was good to be home and to see everyone back. The challenge now, times are changing. Times are changing with budget constraints and restriction. The Budget Control Act tells the Department of Defense that you've got to reduce. You've got to reduce because you don't have the funds. So originally in 2013, the Army looked at it and said, you've got a number of 562. Well, with the current budget, you're going to look at about 490,000 for the total force across the Army. So in 2013, they did an assessment saying this would be the potential impact, and that was the programmatic environmental assessment. Now what we're looking at this year saying, you know, with now the current budget as it stands, if we're unable to make any changes, then we think the Army will have to reduce that additional 70,000 down to about 420. 420 across the force. So additional 70,000 dropped from the 490, and we already understood that was a challenge for us. And the 420 will likely be a significant challenge for us. So the way the Army is looking at this now, in the supplemental programmatic environmental assessment, and that's what they're looking for, the public commentary. So the Army Environmental Command said, we recognize there's going to be an impact. For the true environmental impact, it's probably minimal. For a social economic impact, it'll likely be significant. Because what the Army is looking at across the board in all different installations, and nothing's set, nothing's permanent, nothing's been decided, but they're looking at the reductions right now. And they're saying potentially at Schofield Barracks, with a unit that has, for us as a division, we have at least 2 brigade combat teams. With that structure, they're saying you could potentially lose 16,000 soldiers out of Schofield. 16,000. And that's just the potential. I'm saying worst case scenario, that's what they're looking at. What does 16,000 mean for the division? A division as a whole, we're about 12,000 soldiers. So you could potentially see, again, it's the whole division gone out of Schofield. And more. And that's just Schofield Barracks. If you look at Fort Shafter, they would also look at a reduction at Fort Shafter of about 3,000. So you're talking 20,000, and it's not just, and this is between soldiers, Army civilians, the whole force. That type of reduction, and it's not just those individuals, it's the families as well. So if you thought about the deployment and what the impact was during a deployment where you saw one brigade go, well, oftentimes those families were still back here. They were still part of the community. They were still, waiting for their husband, spouse, to come back home. Well, now there's the potential where that is permanent, where that loss is permanent, and what is the social economic impact at that point in time? And that's what the Army is looking at, and that's what the Army is looking to study, and needs that public input. So we've been about a month into this when the Army Environmental Command did the initial press release saying this is what the Army is looking at. And we have some handouts in the back of where you can provide those comments to Army Environmental Command. And right now that cutoff for comments is August 25th. August 25th is the cutoff date for those comments. But you really need to do that sort of a detailed assessment of what is truly that impact. Because you can say that it will have a significant impact, and that will be a comment. But if you understand and can provide details, on what that could be, then the Army is better informed by what that is. And that's all that they're looking for right now. Again, this is just potential. And the Army's looking at this across the board, a lot of the different installations. But we recognize the force is going to reduce. We're already seeing reductions right now. You hear about the officers, the reductions just in the officer force and the NCO force. And those are ongoing. That is not part of this assessment. So again, we're looking for the public to be involved, the public to understand what the Army has to go through, why we're doing this, and that's sort of where we're at right now. Any questions? Sir?
Two. First, what impact does this have on the housing that was going to be built on Wheeler? Second, if they do deploy, is the Army consider maybe opening up the housing on Wheeler as they did, the Navy did on Airport Point?
I can't tell you what the Army is doing with these potential reductions, how that directly impacts the housing. I would tell you right now, as I understand it, if housing is being constructed right now, there's already a contract in place and the housing will continue to be built. In most cases, that's how it goes. As far as a deployment or reduction, I couldn't tell you what those impacts, and again, it's still all possible. So nothing has been decided. We're still looking at if the force does get reduced, then I can't tell you exactly what those impacts are because I don't know. And again, we just don't know what potential that reduction would be. Sure. Sorry.
Let's use these microphones because this is to be picked up by LONGTERM.
Okay, then this question about the housing and if they would put it out to public housing or public rental like Iroquois Point might be part of the financial study.
I would say right now it's probably too soon to speculate what they would do because they haven't made any decisions on reductions. So I think what you're asking for is a more detailed, what would be the course of action following that reduction. Because they haven't made that decision yet, I can't answer that.
Okay, thank you. Next.
Yes. Colonel, how would this reduction affect the land that presently is under Army control? Will they be relinquishing it, or will they still hold on to the land? You know, like up here we have the East Range, and we have land all around Whitmore and everything. What happens then?
I think you could look at it from the perspective is that they were still, the Army, whatever Army, the size of the force that's here, will still need to train. That is still our mission. We still have that responsibility to protect the nation, to respond to crisis. We will need to train, and we need the training areas that we have now to be able to execute that. So regardless of, again, potential reductions, I think you still have to look at it. There will be a force here. They will train in the training areas that we are currently, that the Army currently possesses, and that is critical for us because I think we all recognize that is a critical resource here in Hawaii.
Okay, we're going to go.
My question is, are you here to just inform us to be prepared for these things that may come down the wire? Because nothing is planned, as you said. Nothing is determined, but you're just letting us know.
Exactly. That is the intent. It's to inform that the Army is looking at this, that the potential impact is there, and without public input, then if we... It is the comments. It's the understanding of if you recognize there is a social economic impact, then how can you share those comments with Environmental Command, Army Environmental Command, so that they understand as they go through the assessment what that impact is to Hawaii. And standing here, I absolutely understand that. When I eat at Maui Mike's, I understand that. If I go shopping at Walmart, I understand that. But Army Environmental Command needs to understand that. And it's the comments that you send to Army Environmental Command so that they hear you. They understand your concerns. They recognize exactly what that impact is. That's what the Army is looking for right now.
Question on that. Say you went down to 420, how would that, in your estimation, affect the civilians on base?
Thank you.
They are part of that reduction is part of the civilian workforce as well. So it's 30%. 30% of the civilian workforce is also impacted. So it's not just looking at the uniformed soldier. And we know that a lot of the people that live in Wahiawa or live around the communities throughout the military I've heard something like 10% of the population in Hawaii is either active, retired, or has some tie to the military in some capacity. 10%? That's what I've heard. I've heard that.
But 90% is owned by the military. 90%. Pretty much.
No.
A lot of landmass like East Range and NC Tams and Striker Brigade Road that stretch to Kahuku, all those lands is half the island.
I will agree that there
Schofield, what we call it Pass.
There are lands that the Army owns, absolutely. And those are training areas for us.
Yes.
They're training areas for us.
No disrespect. No disrespect.
No, and I absolutely understand the concerns about land in Hawaii. It's a vital resource. And there's
Well, my question is to, you pretty much explained what everybody's question was I was going to ask. But my question is, by being here, telling the community now, is this something that we have to worry about economically, or do we have to worry about something like martial law status kind of situation? No, it's serious because there's things that's occurring. Why is there wars overseas? How can the budget be down when we're supplying things to them? These are just facts.
I think there are a lot of things going on in the world. I think what we're looking at is possible impacts here in Hawaii, and what the Army is looking just as just budget reductions. There's things we can't control in this world. There are some things we can't control in this world. What I'm saying is right now, you have input into this process. That's all I'm saying. You have input into this process. Nothing's been decided, but if you go unheard, decisions will be made for you, I believe.
Okay, thank you. We got a couple more questions here.
Colonel, you were mentioning the 2013 reduction and that the Army was having trouble meeting that. Did you meet the quotas at that time, or were there any overages of that left?
It wasn't so much that we were meeting the quotas, it was just the analysis. As the budget continued to reduce, the Army said, this is the size of force we could continue with this level of budget. With the Budget Control Act, and looking at the budget for 2015, the Army said, with that level of budget, this is the size of force we can maintain with that level of budget.
Did you reach the 470? Or you still have, maybe you made 485 and you still now have to come down to 420.
We're still in the process of reducing the force.
Now, the 420, does that take into account military individuals who are going to retire or resign from the service, or is that in addition to the normal reductions that happen through the time of service?
It is. It's in addition to the normal reductions. So it's looking at the all aggregate.
So the number could be more like 500,000 in terms of how many actually have to be reduced throughout the United States. Maybe not Hawaii, but you follow what I'm saying? If you have people leaving on a normal basis from retirement or they finish their term of service, that constitutes a certain number of individuals. You now also have to come down 420. So the number that's being reduced is even higher than are being quoted.
No, I think...
Or will that affect, if it's 30 or 50, does that affect the 420?
I think it's looking at the whole impact. It's saying, if this is our baseline at 420, then it's saying normal reduction would be this to get us to that number, and here's the additional reductions the Army would have to do.
Okay, thank you.
I think a couple of things that folks might need to know, it's a two-part sort of question. Is the programmatic EA posted somewhere currently?
Yes, there's a website for both the programmatic and the supplemental with all the information on there with a specific section for Hawaii.
Okay, second part is when is the comment period? When does that end? When do people need to turn in comments?
The comment period ends on August 25th for that.
Charlie, I think it's the 24th. That's what's posted right now. Okay, any other questions? These are really good questions. Thank you very much. Peter?
With the passing of our senior senator, Noe, what is the likelihood that we're going to face this worst case scenario?
What we understand is that Senator Inouye, with the passing of Senator Inouye, we lost a lot of that experience. And yes, cloud. I think I leave it up to you to do that assessment. I think we have tremendous leadership. They understand the situation. But now it's also up to the public to provide that input.
Okay, thank you. Go around here.
I have a question. Like, being this election year for us over here, how active has Senator Schatz been as far as providing support for not reducing the manpower here in Hawaii? Has he, or has he not?
It is absolutely not my place to comment on any of the elected officials. The Army, the military is always apolitical in this environment. It's not how we operate. We support everyone. We are here for the people. We do the job for our nation. We train, we sacrifice, that's for everyone. And it's an opportunity again to have your voice heard.
Okay, wait just a minute. Let's use the microphones. I think it's a lot easier. Yeah.
My last question would be, you said the worst case scenario would be 420,000. That's nationally, correct?
Yes, that is the number the Army is looking at right now.
And you were saying that the standing force plus the service people here account for about 20,000. What do you think is the least that we're going to suffer, even if we do make these comments? We're going to lose some people, is that not correct? Because I've heard figures that we're losing at least 230 some positions, civilian positions from Schofield no matter what. So my question would be, in the best case scenario, how many are we still going to lose?
I don't have that number. I think what you're looking at, and I think the number you mentioned was part of the Air Force reductions down at Joint Base Pearl Harbor, that they were already seeing some reductions. I think just with the way the budget is right now, you've just got to look at across the force, across the DoD, the Department of Defense, not just the Army, but all the services. The reductions are coming. I can't tell you the size. What I'm saying to you is worst case scenario, if the Army had to, this would be how they, the maximum, the potential maximum they'd be looking at here. But I can't tell you, I can't even provide you a best guess of what it would look like. Unfortunately, I don't.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now I know that they're looking across the board throughout the United States. Does that include around the world where the Army is located? And also, are they looking at us differently than just across the board? Because in World War II, we were the first ones that they hit. Do we have some special, I mean, we're left open. If you guys leave, we're going to be minus so many people that we need.
I think what we understand is there's still this national strategy. The national strategy has this shift to the Pacific. That there's significant effort in the Pacific, and I can tell you from a personal perspective with the 25th, we're doing a lot of the regional exercises with our regional partners, and we're very much engaged in the Pacific region to shape it, to establish a safe and secure environment out here. But the Army's still got to look at where the reductions are going to come. I can't say that any one place is safe from the reductions. I think there's key locations, and they're going to say, okay, we understand this structure here serves in this capacity, and therefore this core of the force will stay there. But I think the Army still has to look at across, and Hawaii is one of the locations that they've identified in this assessment. But you can look in, if you go through the whole programmatic assessment of both the original and the supplemental, you'll look at all the different locations that they are looking at across the Army right now. And Schofield and Chapter have to be one of those with that number.
Okay, thank you, Colonel.
Newspaper recently said they're shutting down the military assistance operation in the Philippines. Isn't that kind of dumb since LSIF is still causing violence there?
Unfortunately, I'm not here to talk about any of the operations going on in the Pacific region. And there's individuals with greater seniority, greater influence that make those decisions. I'm sure those decisions are made with full assessment and so they truly understand the impact. But again, it's other people making decisions. Here's where you can make the decision, or you can be a part of this process.
Kurt, I have a question. What other states are we competing against? Give us some idea of what mainland states with major base installations, like Schofield, like Hickam, you know, what other states might we be competing against? You know, in this decision that's being driven by the Balanced Budget Act, sequestration, it's not a military decision so much as a budget decision. So maybe you can share with us what other states or communities you might be competing against.
Absolutely. And this was the original press release out of the U.S. Environmental Command, and we do have copies in the back. Fort Benning, Georgia, Fort Bliss, Texas, Fort Bragg, North Carolina, Fort Campbell, Kentucky, Fort Drum, Fort Gordon, Fort Hood, Fort Irwin, Fort Knox, Joint Base Elmendorf, Richardson, Alaska, Joint Base Langley, Eustis, Virginia, Lewis McChord in Washington, Aberdeen Proving Grounds, Fort Belvoir. It's all our major installations on the mainland, and we are seen as from a basing overseas Royal Codish unit, but it's still U.S. Army Garrison Hawaii and Schofield Barracks Hawaii.
Just one clarification. Most of those installations that you just read off have a division-sized unit such as the 25th, and the criteria was if there were brigades located on those installations and they had the potential of losing a brigade, okay, like Schofield or all these other ones, then that was one category, and that's where that figure of 16,000 comes from. So the big installations are all pretty much facing the same criteria as we are. Then that was in the 2013 assessment. With this new one now, they've added that other installations, smaller, that don't have a brigade, such as Fort Shafter, but have significant populations, are also on the table. So that's where the 3,500 comes from, the Fort Shafter figures. And there's other installations around the country, like comparable to Fort Shafter, that don't have the big units like we have at Schofield. So there's kind of two different tiers here. There's the big units, and then there are installations, and then there's the smaller ones. All total together, it's the additional 70,000 reduction. So maybe I confused it a little bit. If you take one of these handouts, it kind of lays it out a little bit better, and if you go online, you can look at it. But the bottom line, like Colonel Chang is saying, is this is your chance to input. The public comment period ends on the 25th of August. Okay, that's right around the corner. About a month, not even a month now. And so, if you have significant concerns, whatever they are, the defense of the Pacific, your business, you know, whatever, that's up to you. But as Colonel Chang said, if they don't hear from you, then your voice isn't being heard. And this is what they want. So we encourage you to, whatever your thoughts are, to please make a comment if you see fit. Thanks.
Okay, a couple more questions.
Colonel, if I can ask you this question, you mentioned about the President's National Strategic Plan, and you mentioned that based on our withdrawal from Afghanistan, the focus is now towards the Pacific region. Is that what I heard correct, right?
That is correct.
Okay, and I would assume that the purpose of why it shifted was due to the threat. Okay, or that's probably one of the reasons, as well as maybe economic growth in terms of helping other countries like Indonesia, the Philippines. Would you say that's on track there?
As part of the strategy in 2012, yes, but we also recognize that 2 years later, there's a dynamic threat across the world, and we are involved globally. We are globally, as an Army, we are globally engaged. For our division, our focus is in the Pacific right now.
Right, okay, but that was the whole purpose, right, of the President's National Strategic Plan, to shift the focus based on the threat, economics, and I would presume that's still in place. For instance, that's why we took the 3-star general at Fort Shafter, the USARAC commander, we elevated it to a 4-star. We're doing more outreach, right, with countries like Indonesia, the Philippines.
And we rebalanced our effort in the Pacific region.
Okay, well, if that's the case, I guess the question is, if the focus is on the Pacific, then why are we downsizing if this is where the priority and effort is?
I would still say that it's across the Army. Because some of those same units, even though, yes, there's a focus here in the Pacific, that right now there are units on the mainland that are still being deployed to Afghanistan. And they still have their role. There's still units that have a global mission and a global response force that the Army supports. So yes, while there is a rebalance and there's been a shift in focus, and we felt it in the division headquarters with all our units back here focused in the Pacific region, the Army is a global force and we are part of this larger Army, and we can't completely separate ourselves from that. We'd like to think we can, we'd like to be able to shelter ourselves, and we see the mission every day. We are executing this global mission in the Pacific region, but we are still part of this larger Army. And even if the Army calls us to go someplace else outside the Pacific region, I can't say no to that because we are still part of the Army. So yes, there's the focus here. We are involved here. We understand the local impact that the division has, that the Army has here in Hawaii. But we are still the Army. We are still part of this. I am connected. I am connected to a larger force that has a greater responsibility globally.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. My question is, you're giving us a very short time to comment on this. This is almost the 1st of August. The comments have to be in by the 24th of August. Most of the neighborhood boards in the area recess in August. Is there any chance that the comment period can be extended? I think this is, really very, very short period of time, very short time for community organizations to know about it. No one has come to the Mililani Neighborhood Board to tell us about this deadline. We're hearing it for the first time because I'm here, I'm from Mililani, but I think it ought to be lengthened so that people have a chance to really know about it and comment on it.
Thank you.
I appreciate your comment, I understand your concern. We can share that with the Army Environmental Command, but I don't know if that date will truly change. It's gone out, a month ago they did the press release to make the notification and recognize that that's not the only way we get information. We've tried to share it, I think even through our garrison, we've tried to share it through the neighborhood boards and sent out the same information to the neighborhood boards. I recognize your concerns, and I realize that it seems like the time we're at a compressed timeline. The Army still is looking for your comments. If there's a way to provide that input and share the information with other neighborhoods and the other communities that you can reach and impact, then please try to do so. And this is, again, as the Army's looking at this is one piece of this. The Army's looking at other ways to receive information. I think at future times we'll also have a community listening session. No date has been identified for that yet, but this is one component in this process.
Please make the request to extend the deadline. Thank you.
Aloha, Colonel. Thank you for being here tonight. First of all, I do want to echo the comments of Representative Lee. I live in West Oahu, and I have many constituents in my district who are employed at Schofield, whether it's Rokunia, Kapolei, Makahilo, and this is the first we're hearing of this. So I think, I'm just curious, I see this press release, and it's dated June 26th, but how exactly were you folks getting information out about the supplemental programmatic environmental assessment? And then I noticed that copies weren't even available at the Kapolei Library. You only had it at select libraries. And I understand that it's available online. But again, I guess, I think we need to echo here that we really, how important are the comments as the bottom line?
I can say that they're important. I think you have to do the real assessment. And please don't, there are other ways we can get information out. We can look at other ways where we can share more of this and share the information. But I know that the process was to provide it both for the newspaper with the press release, the Army Environmental Command. I think we've shared it through the neighborhood boards. I think we can relook that process, but it unfortunately doesn't change the timeline right now.
Well, again, if you could, I'd like to echo the comments of Representative Lee, if you could consider putting in that request, because I don't feel it's a sufficient time. In addition, many people are lay people. They've never done this before. They've never looked at a draft environmental assessment. They don't know how to read it, and they don't understand. All they know is what you basically told us tonight, but people who are not here tonight will never understand what the potential impact could be when you talked about numbers. And so I think it can be a little bit intimidating for people, and I think that's something we need to probably go through just to explain what is the process of providing comments, how detailed or how intellectual do they have to be or whatnot.
And I think that's where we can probably work closely with the MAC on how you do that. Because I have to have, again, caution where I can't coach you on what to say. I can't coach you on here's exactly how you would say this for this comment. That can't be my role as the U.S. Army. Potentially, as with the Military Affairs Council, Chamber of Commerce, they can help shape that input.
Okay, a couple more questions. Let's see, going here. How much would it cost to keep levels where they currently are? How much would it cost? In other words, what's the savings they're trying to extract from the reduction in the Hawaii-based military?
I can't say specifically what that cost is for Hawaii, because again, it's the Army and the Department of Defense saying, with this level of budget, across the board it looks like this. What Hawaii's piece of that is, I can't tell you specifically. But we also recognize that there's a higher cost in Hawaii for just doing business than there is on the mainland.
Okay, we're going to go round two right now, so.
Colonel Ben, my question is, since you are requesting that we give you input, what does the Army plan to do with the input we get? Are you going to be using that to go to committees in the legislature? Are you going to just be, considering that internal? I mean, exactly where are our comments going to bring the best benefit, and how do you plan to use it to get that?
I think that particular question is best answered by an Army Environmental Command. And there's the contact information. I can't tell you exactly the process they're going to use, but they do have a point of contact on their information on the website, on the sheets we have back there. If there's any questions about this process, I think the best people to answer that would be Army Environmental.
Okay, thank you.
I'm kind of curious, is it possible for the military to help the community do a survey of our military people to find out how many are integrated into the community? Like how many of the children are attending our public schools, how many go to all our fast foods, to give us a better idea of impact economically to our community.
I think there's the possibility we can look into that. And we very much recognize that we have that impact. It's our kids are in the schools. We're involved in the businesses. We're part of the community. I don't have that number right now. We can see if there's a way to get that better assessment, but I don't have that answer at this time.
Share it with the neighborhood boards too.
Absolutely, absolutely. We recognize that at the neighborhood boards is where the community has an opportunity to touch the rest of the community leadership. We recognize that as very much a focal point throughout the law.
Okay, Colonel, I think, I really want to thank you for just being up there, just standing strong and filling these questions. You're really credit to the U.S. Army, standing in harm's way for us. But anyway, a couple other questions, I think, just a little bit more. I think, Charlie, you have some things to add from the civilian chamber of commerce side.
What caught our attention is the size, the monetary value. In 2013, they're talking about $487 billion. In 2014, they're looking at about another $480 billion. Now, that's a lot of money that is levied on the Department of Defense. And the Army is the largest force. So therefore, likely that they'll take the largest hit. And they looked at a lot of bases. By the way, this is essentially in the United States. The bases in the United States, including Alaska and Hawaii, of course. They've already taken action to reduce the Army strength in Europe. And they've looked at the Army strength in Korea and, in the Pacific area, mostly in Korea and Hawaii. So, but they realize also the shift to the Asia Pacific. Some of you referred to that. And that is very important because we've got to keep peace and stability in the Asia Pacific, or all of the nations in the region suffer, as well as the United States. The Chamber recognized that with the passing of Senator Inouye and Senator Akapa's retirement, we lost a lot of political power in Washington, D.C. And for that reason, the Military Affairs Council of the Chamber has been reorganized to become more proactive in trying to protect the military's presence in the strategic location in the middle of the Pacific, which happens to be Hawaii. And the Army is the first one that's come out with a study that says, okay, here's how we're going to adjust. And in 2013, when they did their first study, Schofield and Hawaii was not touched. And it was very fortunate. But with this added reduction of 70,000 soldiers and having to cut something like $480 billion from the defense budget, something has to give. Our concern is that we're aware of what the cities and towns are doing in Texas, California, Georgia, Virginia, Tennessee, New York, etc. Everybody is fighting to protect their own bases. The competition has never been like this before. Now, Fort Lewis was mentioned. Fort Lewis happens to have a brigade of the 25th Division. And so does Fort Richardson in Alaska. We happen to have 2 brigades here in Hawaii. But, we look at Fort Lewis, we in the Chamber, and we know that Fort Lewis, for example, has a world-class training center. I mean, it is terrific. And we do have training here in Hawaii. East Range, up in the Kahulu's, on Schofield itself, PTA on the Big Island, etc. But to take an Army unit from Schofield to PTA with a heavy training can occur, costs a lot of money. Whereas at Fort Lewis, they can just load them on buses and drive to Yakima. The state of Hawaii, very expensive. You all know it's expensive to live in Hawaii. Well, it's cheaper in Washington State. So it's easier and cheaper to maintain Army units in Washington State at Fort Lewis. Fort Lewis lost a brigade in 2013, downsizing. They sure would like to have more soldiers over there. And then, but everybody else is doing this. Some state legislatures are appropriating state funds to improve the environment, to improve the area, so that the military stays. Some counties are spending county money to do the same thing. Now, this thing came out on 14 June. It appeared front page in the Star Advertiser. Article was written by William Cole. And this was back in June. And that was the first indication something was happening. It was kind of like an alert, Star Advertiser put on the front page. But we've been working with the Chamber of Commerce and the Military Affairs Council to try to figure out what to do. Now here's what the next thing to do, is to write letters in response to this. You don't have to be an expert with all the data and everything. Express your own feelings. How is it going to affect your school, your church, your business? How is it going to impact? Because I'm telling you, all the other cities are doing the same thing. By the hundreds they're doing it. Now once they get done with this letter writing campaign in late August, they're going to evaluate all the inputs on what they receive. And volume will count. Believe me. From our perspective, volume will count because it shows how the community is responding to this. On top of that, later on, after the evaluator, Colonel Chen mentioned listening sessions. Now what that means is they're going to send teams out to all of the communities that are going to be affected. Hawaii being one of them. And they're going to sit down and have a listening session. Maybe at Fort Chapter, maybe at Schofield, maybe here in Wahiawa, I don't know. But that's another opportunity for you to show up and say, I oppose this. It's going to really ruin Wahiawa, Wahiawa, whatever the areas are. So you have two chances. And I take advantage of both of them. One, write your letter and get it in. And even if it's late, send it in. They have to read it. Then wait for the listening session. And when the listening session is scheduled and the word comes out, and Representative Oshiro gets the word out, and all the other legislators show up and show how you feel about it and how it's going to impact. Now, Wahiawa been hit many times. During World War II, occupation in Japan, Korean War, 2 divisions from Schofield were gone, the 24th and 25th. They were gone for 10 years. It impacted Wahiawa. Then, with the Gulf War, and Iraq and Afghanistan, brigades deployed over a period of 8 to 10 years. The community was hurt again. So you have a feeling, for what it's going to do to Wahiawa. Express yourself. You don't have to be fancy. You don't have to act like you're a scientist or a statistician or even a politician. But it's important to express your views. Now there are papers that the Army passed out. I passed out something, 8 addresses, etc.
You're on the back.
Back table. So public input is critical. Very important. So take the time. It doesn't have to be 2, 3, 4, 5 pages. It doesn't have to be long. Express your interest in this.
Okay, thank you very much, Charlie. Any just a few questions? Any questions? Charlie, one of the people asked me earlier is that we're such a small state. 1.4 million. Why was a small community? Can we really have an impact? Can we really have an impact upon those who are making these decisions?
Absolutely. You measure it. See, one of the things is, where's Fort Belvoir in Virginia? What town? But anyway, there are communities surrounding the island coasts, and they're called defense communities. I call them defense communities. Well, around Schofield is Wahiawa, meaning North Shore. I consider that, but when they did the study, this supplemental programmatic study, they said Honolulu County. Well, that includes the entire island of Oahu. So that $1.35 billion measures everything on the island of Oahu. So speak for yourself, for your community, of what you know, and express your opinion. Okay? That's really important.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, no other questions. Okay, well, we have some handouts back there. I want to thank you, Colonel, for coming out tonight, sharing with us. Charlie, thank you very much.
Questions or concerns, see Maryland, the neighborhood board, or Representative Hart, or Representative Oshiro, or Senator Donovan De La Cruz, these kind of people, they can contact me, and I can help.
Thank you very much.